Yes, sir.
No, is there a difference between SCO2 and SCO3?
Larry, you want to take that one?
Oh,
Like in plant uptake?
It's-
I checked the font we were using is SCO2.
it's the,
Yeah. Well, the plant can only use a monosilicic acid.
SiO2.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, so that's a silicate SiO4, yeah. So SiO2 is the chemical form you find in silicate minerals, like sand.
Okay.
And the solubility of that is extremely low.
Okay.
That's not the kind of silicon that's going to be useful. Now, over years and years, that does dissolve a little bit and free up some silicon, but it's not enough to be effective in the agricultural pursuits that we're interested in using it. So it takes that other form.
And it's highly unstable. They got to stabilize that. And from what I understand, it's only stable for about 2 years. So you got to be careful, make sure it's fresh stuff and you're using it. And like I said, Larry, we can run total silicon in the soil and have very high values in there, but I can run a soluble portion too, monosilicic form, and be less than 25 parts per million.
That's too low.
That's too low. Yes, sir?
I work with a crop where we actually try to induce some stress with moisture. It's alfalfa seed production for using leafcutter bees. And my question to you is, you talked a lot about actually preventing the stress, but we're trying to induce a little bit of stress for floral initiation.
That's great.
Can you maybe
Perfect
provide
question.
some ideas on how we might be able to manage nutrients to do the same thing?
Yeah, you can. And yeah, I apologize. A little stress is good. You know, just like us, a little stress is good, but in plants the same way. And yeah, nutritionally, you can induce some stress. Key is make sure it's not caused at those important physiological stages of growth, because that can hurt your production. If you do it before or afterwards, then it probably won't be an issue. Okay? But yeah, in alfalfa, I can see it where you get in, say about 30 days or so. Make sure that stage before it goes pre-bloom, there's no that much stress on the plant. Okay.
But is there a way nutritionally, when you can't control water because we're on a dryland situation for irrigation, is there another way to induce some stress for floral initiation?
Mr. Garcia,
Sure.
radio well can turn on the control. That'll get stressed.
Yeah,
Foliarly, you may.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that before.
You can. The other thing I would recommend at that stage is not only stress, but introduce some hormones. Okay? The more I travel, I talk to more people. For some reason, just like boron, they have this fear factor when it comes to hormones. We have been using them very successfully early on and through the stage, but every time we introduce a balanced hormone product, got cytokinins, auxins, gibberellins, it really enhances seed production. Okay, so I would not be just strictly be looking at a nutrient-induced stress, but also trying to increase your hormone production or introducing hormones into your system.
In general, our approach isn't really to eliminate stresses, it's to manage stresses, because we are aware of situations where we do need stresses to happen in normal agricultural production. So we're not trying to eliminate stresses.
In fact, the last crop we did this was a mustard crop for mustard seed. That was 2 years ago, wasn't it?
Yep.
And typical production around that area, I believe it was, 1,500 pounds
Yeah.
per acre or something like that.
Yeah.
So we introduced a couple of hormone packages in there, and we ended up close to around 3,500 pounds per acre. But yield potential was closer to 5,000, but harvesting issues and shatter, that reduced our yield potential, but still, you know, going from 1,500 to 5,000, just introducing hormones, that's pretty significant.
So we also see, we also grow hemp And it's the same thing. It seems like there's a certain critical period where you have a little bit of stress. Your yield potential increases exponentially.
Oh, yeah. It makes a difference in quality, too, of some issues. I'm aware of a tomato operation in California that uses salinity as a stress at the end of the year to keep the tomatoes kind of small, but they have very high bricks, very high quality. People want those. The yields are down, but quality is tremendous. They sell them out all the time.
Yeah, just a quick question in regards to applying silica as a foliar. You mentioned that you applied it with phosphorus, and you after a rain event, or it was a hail event, I think, and you saw a great response. My question is, what form of phosphorus would you blend with the silica? Because you mentioned high pH incompatibility.
Yeah.
Tips there. I'm from Australia.
In that particular case, they used an amino acid chelated phosphorus, and that company has silicon in their product line, and you heard me talk about the incompatibility issues. That company has solved that problem as long as you're using their product line. So that's the reason why we were able to do that. Otherwise, I'm a big proponent of phosphites because it's a biofungicide, and that's what you're trying to avoid.
Multiple uses.
Yeah, so unfortunately, might not, depending on your calcium form or calcium silica or potassium silica, might not blend well. Do a jar test, but if not, you can do 2 different foliar sprays and get away. But this case, that product line, it was an amino acid chelated product with the calcium silicate that blended okay.
Another thing, I noticed that you were recommending or using a lot of sap analysis for assisting. Is in Australia we found that sap analysis is highly variable based on, maybe it's our climate in Australia, Tasmania for example, a lot of overcast conditions, so the results you get are very, very variable depending on cloud cover, humidity, temperature, to the point that it's almost undependable.
Really?
It's just all over the place now. In south of Mexico, on the Mexican border, maybe you've got blue sky and everything's terrific. Maybe I'm more consistent. Like California's got a very consistent summer.
I've been using successfully in Ireland. And
In Ireland?
In Ireland, we're very high, and we've eliminated a lot of the issues. In fact, there was a carrot grower that was having some major issues, very high crop, very high tops, and I said, well, that's an easy fix. It's excess nitrate, nitrogen causing the plants, bringing disease. Don't worry about it. I started to do sap analysis. Guess what? Nitrates were low, not an issue. So Larry and I were talking about it. So well, it's got to be an induced hormonal effect to the lack, the environment. And sure enough, we balanced nutrition out, and it started promoting its own biological hormones, phytohormones, and then we kept the tops down to a minimum, eliminating disease and so forth.
The real key there is that he overplanted. He had a very high population of carrots, so the enormous amount of crowding. Then with cloudy skies, the competition, natural competition, forces them to grow higher. A number of other people had trouble figuring that out.
Yeah, they've had several people on their farms up there, and they approached us. I went over there to take a look at the information. They send me samples, and very successful. Again, it's also how you interpret the data. You heard me talk about that. Most labs still using that old data, and in fact, they're using a lab out of the UK. And I've talked to them. They approached me about that same situation, and that's the problem, that their sufficiency ranges are outdated. And you can't interpret properly that data using that old interpretation data.
Just to reiterate here real quick, we're not overtly trying to sell you on our lab. We're trying to introduce and to maybe take advantage of some of you who have begun to think that these issues are more complicated than NPK. So that's really the goal here. So just wanted to make sure.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to talk a little bit about sap testing tomatoes. So I'm familiar with leaf analysis or non-leaf analysis. How would the sap be different? What part of the plant would I have?
It's the same part you're taking, generally the most recent fully expanded leaf, but you'll be taking the petiole, okay? Or the stem,
The stem.
yeah. And that's what we're gonna be testing the sap of, okay? Because in the leaf, it accumulates and it's okay. The other thing too, I didn't mention too, is there's differences on the leaf and the sap analysis. If you do, say, a foliar spray, and that's probably what a lot of people have this misconception about sap analysis. Well, I put a foliar spray and it didn't appear. Well, you will not ever see a increase if there's a deficiency in micronutrients, foliar spray, in the sap, because that will only stay in the leaf. Vice versa, you know, if you're taking a leaf and you do a foliar spray, you will see different levels, but it's a matter how you interpret. Remember, the sap flow is what's coming in from the roots and the soils getting into the plant. So you do a foliar spray, you will not see it, and that's why a lot of people have that misconception. Well, I applied a foliar spray, I didn't get a response. Well, you didn't ask the right question. You didn't test the right portion. And I get farmers all the time. In fact, I got some guys that are doing both leaf and petiole. And the reason they do it is they want to make sure that the foliar spray they applied is getting into the plant and getting benefits from it, and that's the only reason. But, you know, as a consultant, I've been using sap analysis since, well, the lab's been using sap analysis since the 60s. So we know what the interaction is when you apply foliars, okay? But
Project the future needs better is what you're saying.
up to 21 days in advance with the plant would
At
be
what
deficient in.
stage? At what stage of the plant?
Pre-bloom, as early as you can.
Pre-bloom.
Yeah.
So sap is the petiole.
Yes, sir.
That's, we gotta make sure we have that right in our head. Being you're taking that off, you could sadly get a leaf and sap.
Exactly.
Why not?
Yeah. In fact, a lot of my more progressive guys, in potatoes, sugar beets, a lot of these guys, they're doing both.
Yeah, why not?
And they're seeing that differences of benefits of foliar sprays and what's we're going. The other thing too is petiole sap analysis is great to see how your chelated product you're using is working in the soil. And that's where we found out where EDTA chelate micronutrients in a high pH soil never get into the plant because of the chelation. You go to a more natural chelation, amino acid or citric acid, fulvic complex with a humic fulvic,
Yeah.
we see the increase right away in the sap
No,
analysis.
sending that to you, just, I'm gonna take your time off, from Ontario. Like, is there a certain amount of days where you can actually get better data? The sooner the better it gets there, right? Like,
Once the plant or the stem is dried, generally not an issue. The problem is if you take the stem and you put it in a plastic bag and send it and it starts deteriorating, yeah.
He's
You can
he's
put it in
asking
paper.
another question.
Okay.
You could, I could put
Yeah.
it in paper, but I could send it right away. When
Yeah.
I do it, I don't have to wait.
Exactly.
And then I'm still okay on the days, say it takes 2
Yeah.
days.
Exactly.
Right there.
Now from Canada, we have best success using DHL compared to FedEx or UPS.
DHL?
Yeah, DHL.
Okay.
On, let's say cucurbits, which part of the plant would you take?
Squash or what particular? Cantaloupe. Rule of thumb, almost recent fully expanded leaf on cantaloupe generally be around the 6 petiole leaf from the tip of the vine back.
But we don't want, do we want the leaf or do we want the?
The stem, the
Branch
petiole.
coming off?
Yes,
Volley.
yeah. Yes, sir.
Certain crops have pretty good growth stages and fertilizer needs for everything. For some of like the more specialty veg crops, is there a place where I could go to find those, or would I use like a generic guide? Like for like table beads or for something like that, would I, like, it's easier to find like wheat growth stages and, you know,
Oh,
Yeah, he's looking at the growth stages of like
Yeah.
beets and all.
yeah.
different, yeah, just different crops.
Gosh,
It's,
I don't know of a particular place that would have them all together.
Yeah.
All of them individually addressed in this scientific literature, but gosh, I don't know.
you know, I mean, closest related crop you can get is probably the best you can do. Then you start working with some of the different stages and so forth and working with it, and you can key in pretty well. I work with some table beets there with our local producer locally. We do some greens, specialty greens as well. That's, you know, unfortunately, some of these crops, there's no plant analysis standards. So I use what's most close related to that crop, and then I have enough experience where I can adjust it based on that data. But the other thing too is, as consultants, we need information from you guys, or not just us, any laboratory, you know. They need that data, that background history, so they can do a proper interpretation and give you a better recommendation. I got samples in the lab that no submittal form. I'm lucky if I get a crop or a variety, and there you go. Well, you heard me talk about the key stages of growth. You know, the way we do it is I keep you guys from having to guess where those ought to be. So I make the only adjustments as far as interpretive standards that I use based on the stage of growth or the age. So if you don't provide the age, and I'm not too familiar with the area, or you got different growing units during that time of year, I might be off and I might not interpret your results as properly as I should. You know what I mean? So it's very important. Just like going to the doctor, they take that background history, family history, and so forth. We need the same thing, you know. And not only me, I said all laboratories require that.
One more thing. When you mentioned the EDTA label, another one, sort of pH is high. What about the lignosulfur?
Oh yeah, humic acid, very, very good complex in there. Yeah.
At any pH.
Yeah. Now, if all you got is EDTA chelate, you can add some lignin or humic acid or fulvic acid, and it'll complex it a little bit better. But if you got a natural product, you can get a zinc sulfate or manganese sulfate formula at the humic acid, and it's a lot better. Yeah. Your natural chelated products, complex products, are way better, especially at high pH soils.
Some people claim that fulvic acid is a better chelator of trace elements, and I don't know if I'd go along with that completely, but a lot of people swear by that. But if you have humic acid or humate, you know, either one of them will work. Mm-hmm.
Noel, in your potato study with silicon there, which type of, was it calcium silicate?
It was a calcium silicate product that I used.
Or does it really not matter in that case?
Depends. In that particular area, that was in Pacific Northwest, even though it's a highly calcareous soil, high pH soil, we are still having calcium deficiencies.
We've experienced the same thing. We're in central Canada, Manitoba, and high calcareous soil.
So that is the reason why we're using a calcium silicate over a potassium silicate. But if I got some areas that we're seeing some major potassium deficiencies, I will recommend a potassium silicate product.
Thanks.
You were talking about the barley, someone mentioned oats with disease and kind of hard. I'm from the PNW, and you were talking about that. We struggle with barley where yields have dropped in half. What were you working, or so I'd like to know a little more about what?
Yeah. Well, again, it's balanced nutrition and starting early. You know, we're taking the first plant analysis probably around 15, 20 days after, and then make sure that we've got that balanced nutrition. Barley, we've also introduced some hormones into the program, and that's just turned everything around for us. And you heard me talk about, you know, hormones. You know, you talk about nutrient deficiencies, hormones are deficient as well in most plants. And you've got to balance that out so the plant can produce it naturally. But I think we can do even better and help them produce it naturally, but introduce some hormones into and Pacific Northwest has been tough. Those guys, I mean, they didn't even want to consider using hormones. And now, I got them with a Texas product sales guys, and they're selling the most hormones they ever had in that area for that reason, because we're seeing phenomenal results. The mustard, I mean, the guy called me and said, hey, so I want to go after 5,000 pounds of seed. I said, man, you're crazy. It's unheard of. But again, we don't know what the genetic potential of a lot of these crops are. And part of the reason is because of the cookie cutter programs at a lot of companies, a lot of universities. How do you know that the plant will be deficient at this stage of growth every year and apply this product every year? You can't. You got so many different environmental differences that induce deficiency, so you gotta ask the plant, and that's where you do a tissue test, sample test, and figure that out, and then you can manage that properly.
And include the soil to see what problems you have there. One barley grower out there that had such terrible irrigation water that he just almost was unable to get anything going. The first thing, or one of the first things we did for him was to recommend some humate in that irrigation water and all, and that got him going in the right direction.
With standard tissue testing, standard soil sampling, we can't identify, we haven't
Really?
identified any problems.
Again, it's, like you said, your standard regional, your mass, and that's what we're talking about,
With
different.
old standard
What's the
criteria.
pH of, I'm sorry, the pH of the soil there?
We're kind of low pH there. We're Woods Hills, 5.5.
Where you at?
Okay,
Moscow, Pullman.
okay. Huh. Let's see. The tissue tests you have show adequate amounts of phosphorus. How about iron and zinc?
It's been a while since it's
It would be very high iron, huh?
very high iron.
Yeah, so you may be inducing some phosphorus deficiencies due to high aluminum in the soil.
Aluminum and iron.
Or
And
not.
don't remember though, we do have aluminum toxicity problems.
Yeah,
Oh,
see,
okay.
that's what's happening, that's why, and you need phosphorus for seed production.
Need some lime,
Lime.
just a regular lime. Bring that pH up to about 6.5. I suspect, just hearing you describe it, I suspect that would get you going in the right direction. But, yeah, you know, it's hard to diagnose that without actually doing testing. The yields have been steadily dropping, not in terms of growing season days or anything like that. Just
20 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sounds like a candidate for remediation there.
And we know liming's an issue because we don't have limestone anywhere close. It's $80 a ton,
I kind of thought about that.
$90 a ton, and in dry land grain production.
Yeah, that's low margin stuff. Now, you could even, instead of broadcast that line, ahead of time, you could dribble some along the drill rows if you have
We've been
equipment
experimenting with that.
to do that.
Put drilled lime in in furrow.
Yeah, but well ahead of planting, you got to give that time to react in the soil, or else it could issue some other problems if you do that close to planting.
We do a lot of work at the Burns, Oregon area, and that's the problem there. The problem was that they got a very high pH, but it's due to the salinity in that soil. And actually, it's non-calcareous soil. Boron levels of about 50 parts per million, because it's got no soil structure.
Irrigation
pH is
water
around
also.
8.5 to 9. So we brought in some beet lime from Idaho, and it just turned it around. We improved the structure, we're leaching. We had over 50% reduction in sodium and boron the first year, well, first 3-4 months.
That's a good point. You should have access to some beet lime.
That's where we're using some.
Yes.
It's far enough away from us. That it's
Oh,
expensive.
okay, so it's a transport issue, yeah.
But it was more cost effective doing that than finding JIT to do that same deal. So we just get some beet lime, acidify it.
That is our cheapest source of lime, so that is what we're using.
Just hearing you describe that, that sounds like that may be a major issue in your production.
Yes,
There's
sir.
some high tunnels that have like over-the-top nutrients. Is there any recommendation on how to bring those down. Like every nutrient is through the roof pretty much. pH is real high.
High tunnels.
It's a drip irrigation?
Yes, drip irrigation.
Yeah, we start our melons in South Texas on tunnels, early melons. Of course, we warm up a lot faster, but we keep them on. So we'll plant late December, 1st January, and we'll keep them on to probably second week in February after risk of frost. But we're injecting everything through the drip, and we're starting early on that.
Is all of your nutrition through drip?
Yes, for the most part, it's through drip in there.
And-
And I think they do they just had pretty much nitrogen because everything else is so high.
And you begin that drip right after you transplant?
Yes.
Yeah, we would have to take a look at your soil analysis and see where you're at, how to balance that out.
But there are some possible methods to get that back down to a reasonable. When you get your slipped out, or are they real floppy, and are they hard to handle, or do they transplant? Okay, or is this a completely enclosed
Yes.
operation? Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. They're not very resilient when they're a little too rich, or get very prone to disease. Yeah, well, we have to have a look at that.
I got a question on bell peppers. On the use of hormones to set fruit, sometimes we have problems on setting fruit, like right after, usually it's not the initial sets, but third, fourth, there, when our plants get stretchy, too much growth. Can you give some ideas on using hormones and how?
Well, there, you gotta be careful. It sounds to me your plant's getting very vegetative. That's telling me you're probably using too much nitrogen, which leading to lack of pollination. The other thing that could be happening as well is lack of boron. Boron is essential for pollination and calcium as well. So once it's set, if you don't have enough boron to set pollen and pollinate that, it will not set. So you could have too much nitrogen and lack of boron causing some of those issues that's occurring later on the. But again, hormones are good. But again, you got to balance everything out accordingly. But seems like, would you agree, Larry, that might be happening?
Oh yeah, exactly. Keeping those internodes shorter, because those types of plants, if they're very happy with their nutrition, they should just as soon grow more leaves and things than make fruit. So, yeah, it's a matter of keeping up with the nutrition, not making it too rich, and having the boron, magnesium, and calcium right at flowering in order to get a strong inflorescence happening. So that's just what sounds like may be happening. I agree with Noel.
Yeah, I see that happen a lot in a lot of those plants, tomatoes too.
They're awful.
You get a very highly bushy vegetative plant, and that's the same thing. You put all that nitrogen early on, you're more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to the insects and so forth, very light fruit set. So in that case, we cut back on the nitrates. Or the other thing too is, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but molybdenum, it's used for nitrate reductase. And the vegetative growth is due to high nitrate nitrogen in the plant. So key, if you can reduce that nitrate to an amine form of nitrogen by using moly or using carbohydrates like molasses, that'll induce fruit set by artificially adding carbohydrates to your plant while reducing nitrates and keeping your growth to bare minimum.
the plant will begin to try to produce more protein to match that. So that begins to reduce the nitrate in the leaves and petioles.
You had, and I looked it up last night and I forgot to write it down. That one form of humic acid,
HA1.
That's a very nice product.
Yeah, they're the only ones that
It
manufacture.
looked up very good, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
What was the name of that product?
Sorry?
What was the name of that product?
HA1, yeah. It goes into solution really well. It's a
Yeah.
very nice product.
The only product will go in
Pretty
solution,
expensive.
yeah, regardless of your pH, will not precipitate out in solution.
It's good stuff.
That's a humic acid product.
Yes. And we have no connection at
No.
all with the people who.
Yeah, we don't sell or endorse any products, but that's such a unique product that's the reason why. And when I hear people say, hey, you know, man, I use humic acid plugged up, my emitter is plugged up, well, you might want to consider HA1's a little bit pricier from what I understand, but that'll alleviate a lot of the headaches, you know, plugged up emitters and so forth. Whether you're using a acid-based fertilizer or a highly alkaline water, it will not precipitate out. Very soluble. Any other questions?
We're going with the tomato question. We're seeing that some of the calcium is getting binded up down low in the plants and not allowing us to get much production up top. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, most of the time when I see that, it's lack of boron. And like I said, I almost tripled what we normally have in sap. For that reason, we want to see higher boron levels so we can move that calcium. Okay.
You see that in a foliar spray as well as in your drip?
Yeah, in my watermelons, I'm putting, at times I'll put 0.2 of a pound in the drip and 0.2 of a pound over the top weekly.
That's actual boron.
Actual boron, 0.2 of a pound actual boron. And phenomenal results. Again, the reason I'm doing that is I'm in a low organic matter soil, sandy type soil. Being an anion, it's going to be flushing every single time you irrigate. So the only time I'm telling you be careful is if you got a very high organic matter level, that's the only time that it can accumulate in the soil. I've seen it in organic growers, home growers, that pile on the compost, have very high organic matter, and they overdo the boron and gets them in trouble. But
Everybody's afraid of boron, so it tends to be underapplied in a lot of places. But it's like everything else; it's part of the balanced system. You got to have that boron available in the plant before flowering. It not only stimulates that inflorescence, it is a controller element for the distribution of calcium and magnesium in particular. So a low boron could contribute to this other issue you're talking about too, the lack of movement of calcium. That could also be caused by an excessive amount of potassium nutrition. Just the potassium is outcompeting calcium. We normally think of it in terms of magnesium, but it also competes with potassium in the soil. So what looks like a simple issue can have a number of different causes. Just have to be aware
or
of
the
it.
use of too much ammonia nitrogen as well.
Oh, yeah.
Could induce.
Now, I grow vegetables on this very sandy soil, low CEC, and my soil is low in boron. Are there vegetables that I should not be applying boron on? It would seem like, I was told like green beans, for example, or cucumbers.
See,
There are some sensitive ones.
Yeah, there are some sensitive ones, and you see that, and that's part of the fear factor that I talk about to a lot of people. That's outdated data. That data goes back 50 years ago when we had much higher organic matter levels that would bind boron in the soil. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah. So just hearing you describe that makes me think of using frequent, very low amounts. These are drip irrigated or microjet irrigated or?
I can do drip, I've got drip irrigation,
Okay.
and I've got foliar
Yeah,
capabilities.
foliar application of all these trace elements is usually a little bit easier for people until they get the soil built up to handle that.
With a low boron on soil test, how much would you recommend putting some in pre-plant? No, don't put the boron.
I
Put in foliar.
in that
You know, I've-
soil.
I've gone into
foliar.
programs where they put 1 pound pre-plant and a fall markout, Pacific Northwest, and expect that boron to be there the following spring. Never gonna happen.
It's an
It's
anion.
flushed away. It's an
Yeah,
anion.
Soluble in
So I
water.
tell them, you water run that in season, in small doses all season long, you're way better off, more cost efficient for you.
What about the potassium on soil like that, pre-plant, percent, like the nitrogen, your potassium pre-plant with the plastic system? Would you, percentage-wise, how much are you putting through the drip and how much are you putting on pre-plant?
Depends. Where I've seen the most benefit pre-plant is using something like K-Mag or Sopomag. We've seen better magnesium uptake when we pre-plant K-Mag or Sopomag.
Local mag?
Yeah, yeah.
Pre-plant?
Yeah, and put it in low CEC, put in some humates, just so we can bind and hold that bioavailable nutrients. Maybe, but, you know, I've done some humic acid with boron fall markout, but still, we can't hold it. But all the other nutrients, it can bind in a complex very well for an extended period of time.
Are you using transplants?
Yes.
Yeah, then for some of these things, you could use a dip, a pre-plant dip too. I think it'll still drop. You use a rotary transplanter?
Plant by hand.
Okay, all right. So doing a root drench at the time of planting is
We
possible.
do that though, we soak down flats.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That would have boron in it too.
Yeah.
We could use
Because that little organic plug will help hold that.
boron in there.
Using any mycorrhizal fungi or anything?
Yeah, that's
That'd be the time to do it at a root dip.
Yeah.
But
Actually,
it's
producing.
okay to dip, transplant, or could you even foliar the transplants in the greenhouse before you go out with the foliar, with the boron?
Mhm.
And do you always use calcium with the boron when you foliar?
Yeah, good question. Anytime you're gonna go out with a calcium product, make sure it's got boron or add boron to it. Every single time.
Every single time
Keeps it
you
mobile.
use calcium.
So in that calcium silicate example, would you have added boron?
If it mixes well,
Oh, that's the
that's the problem.
It
yeah.
should, yeah, it ought to.
I don't know, soluble. I'm not-
Short is
So on
soluble item.
seed producing crops like peppers and tomatoes, should we actually be putting on some boron right at emergence in the greenhouse, or?
Actually, in the plug that you plant into, I think mycorrhizal inoculation is perfectly done at that time, and there are some other things too. So, I think so.
But, yeah.
Depends on the soil test, depends on sap analysis.
Well, he's
But I'm talking about in the greenhouse.
Oh, greenhouse.
Greenhouse transplant trays. Yeah,
Foliar applied?
no, into the plug.
Oh, into the
And
plant.
it's real organic, so it'll hold it.
Yeah, you gotta be
Yeah,
careful there.
Yeah.
You have to be
Very, very
careful.
light dose.
Yeah, a person could probably do some calculations to get that in the ballpark, knowing how
And
many
I've got
plants
some
per acre
experience
you're
using boron.
gonna have, yeah. You just have to be careful, but it's certainly after emergence and things, these foliars in the greenhouse that you mentioned would make good sense.
Is it possible to build boron levels on your soil sample? Like that?
Depends on your organic matter and your CDC.
Organic matter is the
Primarily
real
organic matter.
drying.
Our
ground.
organic matters are between the 2 and 3.5 range.
Yeah, you could probably build some boron. In that organic matter, you know, everybody knows that organic matter has a tremendous cation exchange capacity, and you can hang potassium and calcium all over it. It also has a small component of anion exchange capacity. It's much lower usually than cation exchange. And boron is an anion. It's a negative charge. So I don't really know of any work directly addressing that issue, how much borate that would be, that anion would be occupying the sites and result in good, adequate plant uptake. That's unknown to me. But that's the idea. It's held on those anion exchange sites. So it's a little different than cation exchange, or opposite. So, but I think it could be done by calculating out how much boron you would be adding to an acre of peppers. And then you know what your plant population is per acre, and kind of scale that down to that little plug, you know, and the space between them. Have to be careful because you're right there at the germinating seed. So
You brought up an interesting point real quick about placing some of those trace minerals down in the fall, expecting them to be there in the spring. It's probably not the most fiscal thing to do, right? Because, I mean, that's what we're seeing is our test results in the spring don't show anything.
The spud growers I work with, they're putting down, probably 100 pounds of phosphorus in furrow, fall mark out. And, I mean, early June, they were deficient already, and the crop was just starting off. Why are you spending that money? My mentor used to say, soil is an expensive storehouse. Why do you want to keep it in there? Yes, you might eventually get it back, you know, chelating it, humic acids and microbes, sulfur and so forth. But if you can spoon feed it and put it in your pop-up or pre-plant, will be a lot more efficient. You're way better off.
Even if you're trying to use that with a cover crop program, you're still not going to really much see it. Yeah. Thank you.
Alrighty, I think that's it for us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.